In the quiet tapestry of Oak Haven, a town woven from threads of community and predictable peace, a dark seam appeared one autumn night, ripping through the very fabric of its innocence. 16-year-old Elena Monroe, a vibrant young artist, vanished into the crisp air, leaving behind only the haunting echo of a "see you soon" that would never come. For 2 years, her absence became Oak Haven's deepest scar, a chilling silence that defied explanation, turning a grieving family's hope into a persistent ache. The initial investigation, diligent yet stymied, surrendered to the passage of time, leaving a perpetrator cloaked in anonymity, a truth buried beneath the weight of forgotten moments. The world moved on, but for those left behind, the question of what happened that night remained a gaping wound, a cruel testament to evil's enduring stealth. But what if the most insignificant fragment, a discarded whisper of a clue, held the power to bridge 2 decades of silence? Could the march of progress, a scientific awakening unseen in those distant years, finally force a long-hidden secret into the stark light of justice, revealing the unseen hand behind the tragedy? Oak Haven, 1998. A town cradled within the verdant hills of the Evergreen State. Its very essence was built on a foundation of trussed porch lights, burning late into the night, unlocked doors, and the predictable rhythms of a close-knit community. This comforting certainty, a treasured hallmark for its inhabitants, was abruptly shattered one crisp autumn evening when 16-year-old Elena Monroe was erased from its quiet streets. Elena, a vibrant spirit, painted her world in bold strokes of joy. A budding artist, whose sketchbook rarely left her side, her ideas flowed as freely as the melodic cadence of her laughter. That Tuesday night, she walked home from a late-night study session at the town library, a path as familiar to her as the brushstrokes on a canvas. Her parents, Sarah and David Monroe, held onto her last words, a casual "see you soon" spoken with the effortless conviction of youth. But that simple promise of soon dissolved into an agonizing void. Sarah paced each tick of the kitchen clock, amplifying a raw, visceral dread that had begun to coil within her. Unanswered phone calls became frantic, the quiet house now amplifying a growing terror. David, typically a man of steady resolve, found his hands trembling as he redialed Elena's friends, each negative answer tightening a cold vice around his chest. As Elena had walked home, the crisp evening air felt clean against her cheeks, carrying the faint scent of wood smoke and damp earth. She hummed a tune, a melody for a painting she'd start tomorrow, a splash of vibrant autumn leaves. A future that in that serene moment felt limitless. The ensuing search was immediate, desperate. Detective Miles Corbin, then a fresh-faced officer just finding his footing in the small Oak Haven Police Department, found himself leading a scramble that quickly morphed into a frantic, desperate endeavor. Patrol cars fanned out across the town headlights, slicing through the darkness, their radios crackling with urgent, strained hope. Every park, every back road, every quiet cul-de-sac was scoured. Neighbors, their faces etched with concern, joined the search, flashlights cutting through the shadows, calling Elena's name into the unresponsive night. Yet they found nothing. No discarded backpack, no broken branch, no scuff mark on the empty sidewalk under the flickering streetlights. Only a profound, unsettling emptiness remained. Sarah and David Monroe were plunged into an agonizing uncertainty. Sarah, her voice catching years later, describes the waiting as a torment that hollows you out, a physical weight pressing down, constricting their every breath. You sift through every memory, David adds, his gaze, distant, every conversation, every casual glance, searching for a clue, a warning we must have missed. Elena's vibrant life, her dreams of art school and distant horizons, had been brutally arrested at 16. The lost tore a chasm through their lives, leaving an unhealing rupture in their existence. Oak Haven's long-cherished peace now felt like a fragile veneer, forever cracked. A single profound question settled over the town, heavy and unanswered, casting a shadow that would stretch across 2 decades. 2 days after Elena Monroe vanished, the fragile hope that had sustained Oak Haven crumbled under the weight of a grim discovery. Her body was found in Whisperwind Gulch, a secluded ravine on the town's periphery, a place once known for the whispered secrets of childhood adventurers, now forever stained by an unspeakable act. The news ripped through the community, transforming its initial anxiety into a collective shudder of horror and disbelief. The crime scene presented a somber canvas for Detective Miles Corbin. He arrived to find the area meticulously documented by first responders, but it offered precious few immediate answers. The medical examiner's preliminary findings confirmed strangulation as the cause of death, but the killer had been chillingly precise. There were no clear defensive wounds on Elena, no signs of a struggle that might have disturbed the surrounding earth, no obvious weapon discarded in haste. The perpetrator had been careful, leaving behind a stark, almost sterile tableau of violence. Corbin, his face grim with professional resolve, moved with methodical intensity, directing his patrol officers and K9 units through exhaustive grid searches. Every fallen leaf, every overturned stone in Whisperwind Gulch felt like a potential clue, yet the dense undergrowth and the silent woods seemed to cling fiercely to their secrets. Amidst the painstakingly gathered evidence, a single unremarkable soda can was discovered near the perimeter of the scene. Bagged and tagged, it was a routine item, its profound future significance entirely unforeseen. The days that followed spiraled into a vortex of frustration. Interviews with classmates, neighbors, and local acquaintances yielded no credible information. Teenage anxieties and small-town grudges surfaced, but nothing that pointed definitively to a killer. Rumors whispered like a contagion began to infect Oak Haven's suspicion, clinging to anyone new, anyone different, anyone who seemed to not quite fit the town's image of itself. The Oak Haven Police Department, dedicated but small, found its resources stretched thin. Officers working double shifts, their initial urgency slowly giving way to a creeping desperation. Each fruitless day without a lead calcified the town's growing sense of helplessness. For Sarah and David Monroe, the discovery of Elena's body brought a fresh, brutal wave of pain. Sarah recounts the relentless uncertainty that still haunts her, the cruel dance of false hopes followed by crushing reality. It was like being in a nightmare you couldn't wake from. She reflects, her eyes distant. David echoes the sentiment, the knowledge that her killer was out there walking among us, a heavy, constant pressure on his chest. The initial investigation, despite the dedication of its officers, yielded no clear path forward. For years, the truth of Elena's final moments would remain shrouded, a haunting testament to an elusive killer. Yet within the sterile confines of an evidence locker, a single unassuming soda can held a dormant secret waiting for the science of tomorrow to speak its truth. As the initial frantic search for Elena Monroe waned, so too did her story recede from the urgent clamor of local news cycles. It didn't vanish entirely, but rather settled deep within Oak Haven's collective memory as its most painful, stubbornly unsolved mystery. The investigation, for all its early intensity, had encountered an impenetrable barrier. Leads evaporated, potential eyewitnesses could offer no more than vague recollections, and the forensic science available in the late 1990s simply lacked the sophistication for further breakthroughs. Detective Miles Corbin, now shouldering the quiet burden of the unsolved murder, refused to simply relegate it to the cold case archives. For years, he meticulously pursued every conceivable avenue, propelled by an unyielding need for answers. He revisited the same witnesses, sifting through their fading memories for a forgotten detail. He pored over crime scene photographs until they became a blur of agonizing familiarity, and even consulted with early profilers, eager for any psychological insight into a killer who had left so little tangible trace. Yet each exhaustive effort brought only the same disheartening conclusion: a dead end. The unassuming soda can, once carefully collected from Whisperwind Gulch, along with every other piece of potential evidence, was eventually consigned to the dim solitude of the evidence locker. There it rested, gathering dust, a silent testament to the technological limitations of an era that could not yet make it speak. The stark reality of a cold case took firm hold. The relentless passage of time began to erode the sharp edges of memory, rendering crucial recollections vague and unreliable. Hope, once a resilient flame, slowly dimmed to a cold, persistent ember. For Sarah and David Monroe, however, the relentless march of time offered no solace, only a deepening of their sorrow. Their lives transformed into a perpetual vigil, an unwavering testament to a grief that defied resolution. Each year, they organized a quiet memorial, a persistent act of remembrance that resisted the world's quiet urge to forget. Their tireless advocacy for Elena's memory kept her vibrant spirit alive, yet it could not fill the gaping, constant absence she left behind. Sarah spoke of a quiet desolation, a unique pain in watching Elena's friends, mature, graduate, marry, and build lives while her own daughter's existence remained forever frozen at 16. "It's like living in a parallel dimension," she explained, her voice hushed where everyone moves forward. But Elena is always there, always 16, untouched by time. David, his gaze distant with an enduring grief, articulated the profound struggle of maintaining faith in a justice system that for 2 long decades seemed to have forsaken their daughter. The profound and enduring impact of the unsolved crime etched itself not only into the Monroe family, a portrait of resilient love woven with persistent heartache, but also into Detective Corbin. Despite moving on to countless other cases and climbing the ranks, Elena's file remained in his thoughts, a haunting reminder of the one justice had not yet found. Oak Haven, too, carried a deep scar, a chilling reminder that malevolence could breach even the most innocent of places, altering its collective psyche for decades, waiting for an unseen force to finally pierce the long veil of silence. Decades passed, yet Elena Monroe's case remained a cold, static file, a collection of yellowed reports and long-silenced evidence. While time relentlessly pressed upon the Monroe family and the quiet town of Oak Haven, the world of forensic science was quietly undergoing a profound revolution. By 2018, Nearly 2 decades after Elena's murder, the Evergreen State Cold Case Unit, a specialized team dedicated to breathing new life into long-dormant investigations, began a systematic review. Their mandate to re-examine older cases with untapped DNA potential. Among the files retrieved from deep storage was Elena Monroe's. At the helm of this ambitious initiative was Detective Sergeant Alastair Finch, a meticulous and tenacious investigator whose reputation for solving the unsolvable preceded him. Finch possessed an almost uncanny ability to discern a thread of possibility within a tangle of forgotten details, operating on the firm principle that no case was truly beyond reach. He understood the immense transformative power of advanced DNA technology techniques that had been nascent theories in scientific journals or entirely unfeasible back in 1998. His team initiated a comprehensive re-evaluation of every piece of physical evidence from the Monroe case. It was during this painstaking, methodical process that an unassuming detail long relegated to the periphery surged into sharp focus: the soda can. Forensic specialists armed with extraction methods unimaginable 2 decades prior went to work. They carefully processed the can, meticulously searching for the most minute trace of biological material. Suspense tightened with each delicate step inside the sterile high-tech lab. Detective Finch describes the almost reverent atmosphere, the precise, almost surgical movements of the technicians as they worked to coax a secret from the forgotten object. From residual saliva on the can's rim, they extracted not merely a trace, but a viable, complete DNA profile. This was more than a mere scientific procedure. It was a profound breakthrough. Minuscule amounts of biological material, once invisible to the naked eye, could now yield a complete individual genetic fingerprint. Finch recounts the moment the call came from the lab, the quiet, understated tone of a scientist confirming the impossible. The DNA profile was complete. It was male. Distinct. Unmistakable. A fragment of the past preserved within the most mundane of objects had found its voice speaking now in the unmistakable language of science. It offered the first tangible lead in 2 decades, a clear scientific direction forward. This discovery represented not merely a scientific triumph, but a powerful, rekindled spark of hope for a family that had for so long learned to live with an agonizing void. Truth, long buried beneath years of silence, was finally ready to be unearthed. A silent accusation pulled from the very fibers of the past. The newly generated DNA profile from the soda can was immediately uploaded into CODIS, the National DNA Database. A collective breath was held across the cold case unit. The waiting commenced a period of nervous anticipation that stretched not for days, but for agonizing hours, each one fraught with the hope of a breakthrough. Then the system responded. A match. The result, when it landed, was both startling and unexpected. It wasn't to a convicted felon, which was the typical, often straightforward outcome of a cold hit that provides immediate closure. Instead, it pointed to a sample collected from an unrelated minor assault case from a neighboring county dating back only a few years. This unforeseen connection led investigators to Randall "Randy" Thorne, a man whose name had never once appeared in the original files of Elena Monroe's murder. At the time of Elena's death in 1998, Thorne would have been in his early 20s, an Oak Haven resident living a seemingly unremarkable existence. The unfolding narrative of his life since then revealed a pattern: a man who had moved away from Oak Haven shortly after Elena's death, only to return years later, fading back into the town's periphery. He worked odd jobs, kept largely to himself, and possessed a minor criminal record involving petty theft and a domestic dispute, none of which, on their own, hinted at the dark potential of a violent past. He was to all outward appearances utterly forgettable. Detective Sergeant Alastair Finch and his cold case team meticulously cross-referenced Thorne's known associates, past residences, and any potential connections to Elena Monroe. Initially, the picture was baffling. No direct link emerged. They hadn't moved in the same social circles. Elena, the vibrant artist, and Thorne, the quiet, almost reclusive laborer, seemed to inhabit entirely separate worlds within Oakhaven. The initial surprise among the seasoned detectives was palpable, followed by a flicker of skepticism. How could an unknown individual, seemingly so disconnected from Elena, be tied to her through a discarded soda can from 2 decades ago? Finch, however, held firm, emphasizing the crucial, irrefutable power of the genetic evidence. It was not merely circumstantial. It stood as an unyielding biological record, bridging 2 decades of silence and forgotten moments. This biological signature was the undeniable anchor. The investigation now pivoted, dramatically shifting from purely forensic discovery to a meticulous, labor-intensive process of intelligence gathering. The team began building a comprehensive picture of Randall Thorne's life, scrutinizing his movements and activities in 1998, searching for any overlooked detail, any faint echo that might connect him to the tragic night Elena disappeared. CODIS, the Combined DNA Index System, represented a nexus of forensic possibility, a technological marvel, unimaginable in 1998, a time when such a definitive match would have been a scientific fantasy. In Elena's initial investigation, the ability to extract and match DNA from such a minuscule degraded sample simply did not exist. This critical technological gap explained how Thorne, a quiet, unremarkable figure, a ghost in the system, had successfully evaded accountability for so long. But now that ghost had a face and the hunt for the truth had entered a new relentless phase. With Randall Thorne pinpointed as the primary suspect, Detective Sergeant Alastair Finch's cold case team launched into the delicate, demanding phase of covert surveillance. Their objective was intricate, a dance of strategic patience. Observe Thorne's habits, his associates, his every mannerism, and crucially legally procure a fresh DNA sample. This new sample was vital for an irrefutable comparison against the genetic profile from the 20-year-old soda can. Across Oakhaven's familiar streets, a silent shadow play commenced. Plainclothes detectives, trained masters of anonymity, meticulously charted Thorne's routine. They tracked him from his nondescript, slightly dilapidated apartment to construction sites, then to the same local diner where he often sat alone, nursing a lukewarm coffee. Finch knew the unique challenges of working in such an interconnected community. A subtle misstep, a lingering glance could unravel weeks of work. Every interaction, every predictable routine was logged, slowly building a comprehensive picture of a man who for 2 decades had lived beyond suspicion. A constant low hum of tension resonated within the surveillance team, a shared anticipation for the opportune moment. It presented itself on a Tuesday afternoon. After a solo lunch, Thorne casually tossed a crumpled coffee cup and a half-smoked cigarette butt into a public trash receptacle outside the diner. Under the watchful, unblinking gaze of the surveillance operatives, these seemingly innocuous items, now charged with critical significance, were discreetly collected. Handled with the utmost care, they were immediately whisked away to the forensic lab for urgent analysis. The confirmation arrived swiftly delivered, with the precise factual certainty of scientific discovery. The DNA profile from Thorne's discarded items was an absolute irrefutable match to the genetic material on the soda can from Owena Monroe's crime scene. The link was no longer theoretical. It was concrete, undeniable. This conclusive forensic proof ignited a powerful, renewed sense of purpose within the cold case unit. Finch speaks of the profound blend of relief and grim determination that settled over his team relief at finally identifying their suspect, coupled with an unwavering resolve to bring justice to Elena and her family. The long, silent hunt was nearing its end. The stage was now meticulously set for the next most critical phase, the direct confrontation. With the irrefutable DNA match now firmly linking Randall Thorne to the crime scene, Detective Sergeant Alastair Finch and his cold case team intensified their efforts, systematically weaving a wider net of corroborating evidence. The genetic signature was the bedrock, but a conviction demanded more. It required a case meticulously constructed to withstand the inevitable challenges of a courtroom. They revisited original witness statements from 1998, meticulously re-interviewing those still residing in Oak Haven. Decades had passed, but the team hoped that with a new suspect in focus, a forgotten detail might surface. A casual comment once dismissed as insignificant, now poised to connect Thorne to Elena. This renewed scrutiny yielded a crucial detail. A former high school acquaintance of Thorne's, now a middle-aged resident, recalled Thorne frequently driving through Whisperwind Gulch around the time of the murder. He had used it as a shortcut to his then-girlfriend's house, a detail that 2 decades ago held no particular weight, but now became a crucial, localized connection. Furthermore, cold case investigators delved deeper into Thorne's life in 1998, meticulously reconstructing his past. They uncovered a subtle but disturbing pattern, minor brushes with the law, escalating aggression in personal disputes, behavioral issues that at the time hadn't been linked to anything serious, but now suggested a darker undercurrent. A former employer also recalled Thorne's sudden, somewhat abrupt departure from Oak Haven shortly after Elena's murder. He had attributed it to a new job opportunity, a convenient explanation that now appeared suspiciously timed. Each painstakingly unearthed fragment began to coalesce into a clearer, more troubling picture, demonstrating how circumstantial evidence could now reinforce the potent genetic proof. Finch's team understood that while the scientific evidence was paramount, the coming confrontation would be a psychological battle. They meticulously developed a strategy for the interrogation, preparing a comprehensive psychological profile of Randall Thorne. They anticipated his likely deflections, his attempts to minimize, deny, or invent false narratives. They knew they had to be prepared for every evasion, armed not just with scientific certainty, but with a growing body of corroborating evidence designed to trap him in his own deceptions. The chapter culminates with the strategic decision. It was time to bring Randall Thorne in for questioning, setting the stage for a dramatic, high-stakes confrontation, a reckoning 2 decades overdue. The day Randall Thorne was brought in for questioning marked a critical inflection point, a 20-year silence poised on the verge of shattering. Detective Sergeant Alastair Finch, a figure of calm, understated authority, accompanied by the sharp, intuitive detective Jenna Reed, ushered Thorne into the austere, windowless interview room. Their initial approach was meticulously calibrated, soft-spoken, almost conversational, designed to foster a fragile rapport and, for a time, lull Thorne into a false sense of security. Thorne initially played his part with practiced ease, presenting himself as cooperative, if subtly bewildered by the sudden attention. He feigned a hazy recollection of Elena Monroe, claiming he barely remembered her. He expressed a well-rehearsed confusion as to why he was being questioned about a decades-old murder. His demeanor remained placid, his hands resting calmly on the table, his eyes meeting theirs with an innocent directness that masked any underlying tension. His answers were laced with vague recollections and non-committal statements, meticulously crafted to project the image of an ordinary man caught in an unfortunate, bewildering misunderstanding. The narrative tension tightened imperceptibly, focusing on the subtle shifts in Thorne's body language and the detective's calculated, unwavering responses. As the interrogation progressed, Finch strategically introduced fragments of the cold case details of the time, the place, the lingering questions that had haunted Oak Haven for 2 decades. Every flicker of Thorne's eyes, every subtle hesitation in his speech was under scrutiny, searched for any tell of recognition or discomfort. Thorne parried, deflected, and continued to weave his narrative of innocent detachment. Then the pivotal moment arrived. The detectives, executing a move carefully rehearsed, finally laid out the undeniable evidence, the DNA match irrefutably linking him to the soda can found at Elena Monroe's crime scene. The words hung in the air, heavy with consequence, stripping away the carefully maintained pretense. Thorne's meticulously constructed composure began to fray. His face, previously impassive, tightened almost imperceptibly. A muscle jumped in his jaw. His answers became clipped, his denials more emphatic, betraying a rising panic that fought a losing battle against his practiced calm. The strategic application of psychological pressure, coupled with the unassailable scientific proof, transformed the interview from a casual chat into a high-stakes intellectual contest. The detectives observed intently as the mask of innocence meticulously worn for 2 decades began to slip, revealing chilling glimpses of the deceptive perpetrator beneath. The relentless psychological engagement had fully begun. As the DNA evidence became an undeniable, irrefutable truth, Randall Thorne's carefully constructed facade of innocence began to violently unravel. His placid demeanor dissolved, replaced by a persona that shifted rapidly from feigned ignorance to agitated defensiveness. His initial denials, once delivered with disarming calm, now dissolved into a desperate, tangled web of fabrications. His first attempt at evasion was clumsy. He claimed he had indeed been in Whisperwind Gulch that night, but only to meet an unnamed friend, and had simply discarded the soda can. Detective Sergeant Alistair Finch, his gaze steady, gently pressed. Which friend, Mr. Thorne? Why a secluded ravine for a casual meet-up? Thorne stammered, his eyes darting, unable to produce a credible name or reason. Detective Jenna Reed then laid out the forensic reality of the DNA. On that, can Mr. Thorne is consistent with more than a casual discard. It speaks to a prolonged presence, a close proximity at a moment of extreme duress. Cornered by scientific precision, Thorne's story immediately warped. He then invented a narrative of being a passive witness to Elena's abduction, a frightened bystander, too terrified to report what he'd seen. I saw someone, he mumbled, his voice now lower, a drifter. He just grabbed her. He attempted to deflect blame onto this phantom accomplice, a shadowy figure he couldn't name, couldn't describe. Finch and Reed, meticulously dismantling each new lie, cross-referenced his evolving narrative with established facts and the unshakable truth of the DNA. They presented him with an exacting timeline of events that rendered a passive witnessing implausible, the stark absence of any other witnesses or corresponding evidence for a second individual, and the brutal, intimate reality of the crime scene itself. The narrative focused relentlessly on Thorne's increasing frustration, visible in the tightening of his jaw and the erratic tapping of his foot. The escalating psychological pressure exerted by the detectives chipped away at his composure, revealing the raw panic beneath. He became defensive, then overtly angry, his voice rising sharply in frustrated outbursts. "You don't understand," he insisted, slamming a fist lightly on the table. "Things got out of hand." Each new, desperate fabrication only served to dig him deeper into a chasm of inconsistency, a labyrinth of lies from which there was no plausible escape. Finally, utterly cornered with no credible exit remaining, Thorne offered a partial, distorted confession. It was an admission of guilt, cloaked in self-preservation, a desperate attempt to minimize his involvement. He painted himself as less culpable, a victim of circumstance. Elena, he claimed, had resisted his advances, and things had gotten out of hand. It was a chillingly stark claim, devoid of remorse, yet profoundly revealing. This partial confession, though incomplete and self-serving, was a monumental breakthrough, a critical admission that, when coupled with the irrefutable DNA evidence, would ultimately seal Randall Thorne's fate and bring a measure of truth to a 2-decade-old mystery. The battle of wills had ended, and the truth, however ugly, had finally begun to surface. Armed with Randall Thorne's irrefutable DNA evidence and his crucial, if distorted, confession, the long-dormant quest for justice for Elena Monroe finally surged forward. The District Attorney's Office, under the formidable leadership of Assistant District Attorney Eleanor Vance, acted with decisive speed. The meticulously resurrected case was swiftly presented to a grand jury. After reviewing the overwhelming scientific evidence and Thorne's own shifting statements, the grand jury returned a swift indictment for first-degree murder. This moment, 2 decades in the making, unleashed a torrent of conflicted emotions for Sarah and David Monroe. A profound sense of relief, a fragile tendril of hope, entwined with a fresh, visceral wave of pain, as the brutal details of their daughter's final moments were re-exposed to the harsh glare of official scrutiny. Sarah, years later, described the sensation as a strange kind of freedom, a burden lifted, yet it still hurts with an unbearable clarity, because now, finally, we know. Assistant District Attorney Vance, a prosecutor known for her methodical approach, immediately embarked on the arduous process of trial preparation. This involved an intricate compilation of cutting-edge forensic reports from the cold case unit, re-examined witness statements from 20 years prior, and Thorne's own self-incriminating, inconsistent admissions. Pre-trial motions became a legal battleground as the defense vigorously attempted to challenge the admissibility of the decades-old soda can evidence and Thorne's confession alleging coercion and procedural missteps. However, the unimpeachable integrity of Detective Finch's cold case investigation stood resolute against the intense legal scrutiny. Every procedure had been meticulously documented, every piece of evidence painstakingly accounted for. The complex legal ballet illuminated how advanced forensic techniques, once a distant aspirational hope for investigators, now constituted the irrefutable bedrock of the prosecution's formidable case. For the Monroe family, navigating these initial legal proceedings, the arraignments, the pre-trial motions, The endless procedural discussions was an emotionally harrowing ordeal. Each court date was a stark reminder of what they had lost. Yet, it was also a renewed source of resilience. Sarah found a quiet, burgeoning strength in witnessing Elena's name finally reclaim its place at the center of a living, breathing case, rescued from the dust-laden anonymity of a forgotten archive. David, for the first time in what felt like an eternity, permitted himself a fragile spark of anticipation, a nascent hope that the justice he had tirelessly pursued might finally be within his grasp. The stage was now irrevocably set for the trial, where the full harrowing chronicle of Elena's last night would finally be laid bare, not solely for a grieving family or a haunted detective, but for a jury of her peers in the unyielding arena of a court of law. The trial of Randall Thorne for the murder of Elena Monroe transcended mere legal proceedings. It captivated Oak Haven, drawing the decades-old tragedy back into agonizingly sharp focus. The small courtroom buzzed with a palpable mix of somber anticipation and grim determination as residents who had carried the crushing weight of the unsolved crime for years now watched, hoping for definitive answers. Assistant District Attorney Eleanor Vance, her voice clear and resonant, presented a commanding case. She meticulously wove together the cold case team's diligent work, the irrefutable DNA evidence extracted from the soda can, and Thorne's own shifting self-incriminating statements from the interrogation room. Vance painted a stark, unsparing picture of a predatory individual whose opportunistic act had shattered a family and haunted an entire town for 20 agonizing years. Her narrative was relentless, each piece of evidence a brushstroke revealing the darkness that had long lain beneath Thorne's placid exterior. The prosecution called a series of forensic experts. Dr. Eris Thorne, a leading geneticist from the state lab, no relation to the defendant, testified with quiet, authoritative precision about the cutting-edge techniques used to extract and match Randall Thorne's DNA. His testimony was a masterclass in scientific certainty, leaving no credible doubt about the defendant's presence at the Whisperwind Gulch crime scene. The probability of another individual matching this specific genetic profile is astronomically small. Dr. Thorne stated, his words underscoring the irrefutable scientific link. Following this, Detective Sergeant Alastair Finch and Detective Jenna Reed recounted the interrogation, detailing Thorne's escalating series of evasions and his eventual partial confession. Finch described the subtle shifts in Thorne's demeanor under pressure, while Reed methodically broke down the inconsistencies in his stories, demonstrating how each fabrication only served to further implicate him. Then came the poignant testimony of Sarah and David Monroe. Dignified in their profound grief, they offered a heart-wrenching account of Elena humanizing the victim, whose name had for so long been synonymous with a cold case. Sarah spoke of Elena's boundless creativity, her dreams of art school, the way her infectious laugh could fill a room with light. David, his voice thick with emotion, described the enduring void, the milestones his daughter would never reach, reminding the jury of the vibrant life that had been so brutally extinguished. Their words were not delivered with overt anger, but as a raw, deeply personal plea for justice, allowing the jury to glimpse the true, unquantifiable human cost of Thorne's actions. The defense, faced with such overwhelming forensic and testimonial evidence, largely attempted to dismantle the prosecution's case by casting doubt on procedure and motive. They challenged the chain of custody of the decades-old soda, suggesting the evidence could have been compromised over 20 years. They vigorously argued that Thorne's confession had been coerced, a product of psychological pressure in a grueling interrogation. They sought to portray Randall Thorne not as a cold-blooded murderer, but as a troubled, easily manipulated man caught in a regrettable web of circumstances and misunderstood by aggressive detectives. Thorne himself remained largely impassive throughout, his gaze fixed straight ahead, betraying little emotion. The jury deliberated for 3 days, a period of agonizing suspense that stretched like an eternity for the Monroe family. Each passing hour was a fresh torment, resurrecting fears that the elusive truth might once again slip away. Finally, the courtroom doors opened, and the jury filed back in their faces, unreadable, their expressions betraying nothing. The clerk called for the verdict. A collective hush fell over the room, so profound that the rustle of clothing seemed deafening. Then the word clear and resonant guilty. On all counts. The courtroom erupted. A collective gasp, then a wave of quiet, shuddering sobs from Sarah and David Monroe, their bodies shaking with years of pent-up emotion. David reached for Sarah's hand, his grip tight as tears streamed down their faces, tears of sorrow, but also of a profound, long-denied release. The chapter concludes with this raw, cathartic moment, capturing the painstaking legal battle and the profound relief and vindication that accompanies a long-awaited verdict, signaling the end of a 2-decade-long quest for truth and the difficult yet hopeful dawn of a new chapter for the Monroe family. In the aftermath of the guilty verdict, the final act of justice unfolded. Randall Thorne, his face still largely impassive, even in the face of absolute defeat, was formally sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The courtroom, still raw from the previous day's emotional climax, settled into the heavy weight of this definitive pronouncement, a closure that had been 2 decades overdue. During the sentencing hearing, Sarah Monroe rose to deliver her victim impact statement. Her voice, though trembling with the profound well of grief she carried, was resolute, each word a testament to her unyielding strength. She turned to face Thorne, who sat motionless, meticulously avoiding her gaze. "Mr. Thorne," she began, her voice gaining a steely edge, "you plunged my family into a chasm of grief, so deep it felt unending, a darkness that consumed our lives for 20 years. You stole from us not just a daughter, but a future." Elena would have been 36 now. She would have been a celebrated artist, perhaps a teacher, maybe even a mother herself. Sarah's eyes, though wet with tears, burned with an unwavering demand for accountability. She recounted the milestones. Elena would never experience graduations, weddings, the simple joy of growing old. His singular depraved act had cast an enduring shadow over every single day since. Her words were a raw, unfiltered expression of pain, a searing indictment delivered directly to the man who had caused it, but also a powerful testament to her enduring, unbreakable love for Elena. For Sarah and David Monroe, the resolution of the trial did not erase their loss, for the wound of Elena's absence remained a deep, tender place. Yet it was now accompanied by a profound measure of peace, a quiet calm after years of churning uncertainty. David Monroe, his shoulders visibly lighter, spoke of finally being able to mourn their daughter fully without the torturous weight of the unknown, without the agonizing question of who still walked free. "We can grieve now," he murmured, "not just for her, but for the years we spent trapped in limbo." They found strength in honoring Elena's memory, channeling their sorrow into continued advocacy for victims, ensuring that no other family would endure such a prolonged silent battle for truth. Detective Sergeant Alastair Finch, the meticulous architect of the cold case unit, reflected on the immense significance of the case. This wasn't just another file, he stated, his voice quiet but firm. This was Elena Monroe. 20 years. Every cold case represents a family waiting a life unavenged. Alongside him, Detective Miles Corbin, now a grizzled veteran, felt a deep personal vindication. Elena's case had been his first haunting, unsolved murder as a young officer. "I always carried her with me," Corbin admitted, his gaze distant. "It feels like she can finally rest. And so can a part of me." For both men, it was not merely a professional achievement, but a deeply personal fulfillment of a promise made across time. The narrative then expands beyond Elena's individual story to discuss the broader implications of cold case forensics. Advancements in DNA technology, once a distant dream, now relentlessly continue to bring closure to countless families, transforming seemingly unsolvable mysteries into narratives of justice. The very essence of modern law enforcement had been reshaped, offering hope where none had existed before. The unassuming soda can, once an innocuous object tossed away in a fleeting moment of carelessness, now stood as a formidable symbol. It was a testament to relentless scientific progress, the unwavering dedication of investigators who refused to give up, and the enduring power of a community's demand for truth. It spoke volumes without a sound. The episode concludes by emphasizing Elena Monroe's true legacy, not just as a victim whose vibrant life was tragically cut short, but as the inspiration for a tenacious fight for justice. A fight that, against all odds, against the relentless march of time, eventually triumphed. Through this triumph, Elena's voice, once silenced in Whisperwind Gulch, would finally be heard, her memory resonating through the halls of justice, ensuring she would never truly be forgotten. In the indelible print of science and the enduring spirit of justice, a faint echo from the past finally found its voice. If the enduring quest for justice and the silent scientific resurrection of forgotten truths captivate you, join the Shadow Files for more compelling investigations. Don't forget to subscribe to Shadow Files and hit the notification bell.